listeners from around the world. Are you ready? Do you love movies, music, animation and art, acting, gaming, and all things creative? Well, you've come to the right place. Introducing your host, award-winning writer, director, voiceover artist, and owner of MLA Entertainment, Keiko!
Well, thank you, Josh, and hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keiko's Diary, your favorite podcast for all things entertaining and creative. Oh my, today's episode is one of our very best yet. But first...
Shameless plug-in!
Sorry, not sorry. Hop on over to our YouTube channel and check out our original action sci-fi web series, Project Infinity. It's got the best voice cast from Japan to Australia to New York, far and wide. The story is really gripping and intense, plus there's hours of love and hard work poured into every moment of it, so go check it out because it's worth your time. Also, like, subscribe, and comment to show your support. Now on with the show. Today, we have a true legend and pioneer of the industry joining us. His company was one of the best music production and publishing houses in Hollywood for over 25 years. As a concert promoter, he showcased big names such as Stevie Wonder, Linda Ronstadt, the Jackson 5, the Temptations, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Gladys Knight. His work as a producer and music supervisor in film and television is truly astounding. Just a handful of titles include The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and even the worldwide phenomenon Sailor Moon. He is also the author of Don Perry Produced the Music, My Journey Through the Golden Years of Rock and Roll, which you should so go purchase your copy right now. It's amazing. Everyone give a very warm welcome to the incredible...
You thought you'd be my only, said you would be true, but baby, since you hurt me, here's what you'll have to do, can't lie, cry, I'm leaving you.
Don Perry.
Yeah, I think I should quit while I'm ahead.
Well, welcome to the show, Don. We're so thrilled to have you here. I've been looking forward to our conversation. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and how about you?
Yes, I'm doing pretty good myself. What I love about your story, and it's especially evident in your book, which we'll be discussing in a moment, is you can really look at your life and see how one thing led to another. So you first started out with one dream, and you set out to achieve it, but one thing led to another, and you kind of went on a completely different course than you planned for, but it led to amazing things, and it just shows how our steps are guided, and it's just really cool to look back and see how you were led to where you are now.
Well, that's what was so incredible about writing the book, was a chance to look back and savor the time I had, because when you're in the middle of it, when you're working, you're so wrapped up in it and hoping that you go to your next project. So you don't often have time to sit back and say, gee, that project was good, or that person was great to work with. So it was a chance to kind of relive 30 years of the music business. And I don't think many people get the chance to do that. So it was really gratifying writing the book.
I can imagine. I've been reading it, and I just find your journey so fascinating. And the way you've written it is, it really feels like, as a reader, you're getting to sit down and have a conversation with you. It feels very personal.
Well, I feel like my life was personal to me. And I hoped it would be personal to other people. But, it really came out of, I semi-retired after I did Sailor Moon and moved to Carmel, California. And I wasn't ready to totally retire, so I got a job at Carmel High School working with kids. And they were curious about rock and roll. And my wife managed a coffee house in downtown Carmel, and a lot of young kids worked there, and they played the old rock and roll things. So there was such interest, and I started talking to kids, especially in the music department, about what it takes and how to do it. And the book, I thought, was good for someone who's trying to get into the business, but is afraid of failure. If you read the book, I probably failed more times than I was successful, but out of each failure came the opportunity to do something else. So that's what I wanted to convey in the book, but it took me about halfway through it to realize that.
Yeah, I love it. It's very fascinating, and it just shows how what feels like a failure as you're experiencing it can often be something that's just leading you to something greater. And I love that about your story.
Well, thank you. And I hope that, I've had a few letters, and I still get contacted by people, and I do some seminars, and I do a lot of these. Been doing a lot of podcasts and interviews lately, which is very, very nice. I wondered where all these people were when I was in my career, and I could have used a boost,
Absolutely.
But it's still fun 30 years later.
Absolutely. It just shows how the body of work that you created lives on for so many years, and you continue to get new fans as the years go by.
That's what's amazing, because again, when you do a job, I did a lot of low-budget films, I did a lot of television, and you finish them and you don't have any idea whether anybody's going to see it or like it or enjoy it. And when you find out that people remember those things, some of them are obvious. So the Grizzly Adams series was so popular, it had a third of the TV market when it was on, and that was phenomenal. So you knew millions of people were watching that.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of the projects I did that I said, I wonder if anyone will ever even see or hear this. So it's nice to be remembered for some things.
Yes, absolutely. Especially in this internet age that we live in, it's so much easier for people to discover things and realize that you're the mastermind behind so many things that they've always loved.
Well, I had a lot of help from my friends. But it's as I said, it's really I'm really proud of that when people send me an email or contact me and say, I saw the music for, or I heard the music for a picture. I don't know if you remember the Bikini Shop. Is there a soundtrack album because the songs were so good? Well, no, there isn't, and the picture didn't do much. But it's amazing, as you said, through the internet that people see and hear and contact you. So it's been fun. It's been a fun few years in going back and discovering new people who are finding out what we do.
I love that. That's really cool. And so with each guest, I always love to just kind of go back in time and start from the very beginning. And so I was wondering if you could tell us, what are your earliest memories of life? What's the first thing you remember?
Oh, boy. That's I have to tell you, that's pretty far back in history. But, I was very fortunate. I was the third son of 6 boys that my parents had. And we were a large Italian family. Mm-hmm. What I remember, earliest remembrances are, my big brothers and playing ball, playing with my cousins. But ironically, I was 4 years old when the Second World War ended in 1945.
Oh, wow.
And I remember as a kid, my uncles, a couple of uncles that were in the Navy, and I remember them coming home. I remember that we couldn't have certain things because of the war effort. I remember my grandmother being so thrilled that her sons came back. Mm-hmm. So those were interesting memories for a little guy. I'll never forget, my parents would say, eat everything on your plate because there are starving children in Europe. And I could never understand how my eating would help those starving children. But but those are earliest memories, but they're pleasant memories because I was a little brother who was just great to hang out with my big brothers and play ball and have a good time. So I have warm family early memories, and I wish other people. I have an only son. He didn't get to experience having 5 brothers,
Right.
But it was a wonderful time to grow up with family being your friends as well. So that's the earliest, was just being a kid, enjoying being a kid.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you can look back fondly and that it sounds like your family was pretty close.
Yeah, we were a very close family. So I had that. I always had family behind me, and that means a lot. So, I wish they were still around. I wish my mother and father, there's still times when things happen, and I'd love to pick up the phone and say, gee, this happened today. Because my mother was totally proud of all of her boys. And 4 of us, my 3 brothers, followed me into the music business. So we all ended up at one point or another in L.A. in the music business.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, well, I understand. It doesn't matter how old you get, you always need your parents. But I know that they must be so proud of you to this day and all you've done from above.
Well, like I said, my mom was proud of all the kids, whatever we did. So, she didn't, she died young, and she wasn't around to see a lot of our success, but she knew we were on the way. She just had a feeling, and she encouraged it. So she used to tell us, my chest fills with pride, and she'd take a deep breath and fill her chest up. So,
oh, that's just wonderful.
It's a funny thing we always remembered about her. Among other things, she had a great sense of humor. Yeah, but then with 6 boys, I think you have to have a sense of humor.
Well, I can see where you maybe get your sense of humor as well. It must be from her.
Well, I had to develop it. In the business I worked in, I was often between people who were ready to kill each other, and I had to keep everybody calm.
Yeah, so
sense of humor
comes in handy. So your book, which we were talking about, is called Don Perry Produced the Music, My Journey Through the Golden Years of Rock and Roll. And so, like I said, I've been reading it, and I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to continue reading it. And I noticed that you say as a kid you wanted to be a major league pitcher. So could you tell us about that? How long did you play baseball? And feel free to fill us in a little bit more on your book and what it's about.
Yeah, it's interesting because like every kid, I started out playing baseball, and I was a left-handed pitcher, and I had my heroes, a pitcher named Walt Spahn, going way back. He's the winningest left-handed pitcher in history.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to be Warren Spahn. And there was no Major League Baseball on the West Coast then, so you had to watch television if you were going to see baseball. But I patterned myself, I thought, after him. But I did play baseball. I was a pitcher. I played all of the Little League and Babe Ruth League and high school ball.
Yeah.
And I actually had an opportunity my senior year to go to, I played in what they would now call a rookie and prospect league with the St. Louis Cardinals. And they invited me to their spring training camp, minor league camp. And I was going to go to San Jose State at the time.
Right.
And, and ultimately I also was offered a contract by the Minnesota Twins to go to Missoula, Montana and play minor league ball. But in probably the only piece of advice that was backwards, and I was only 17 years old,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a rough life going on the road and in those days in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And my parents, who had never been to college, said, you can always play baseball, but you can't always go to college. So they encouraged me to go to college, and it's backwards. You can always go to college. But I ended up going into the service, and I also played baseball in the service with a lot of minor league players. So I was good enough to play on that level. Probably would have never made it to the majors. But through all of that, and I joke about that music being a plan B, but through all of that, I was still involved in music and playing and writing songs, and that was always a major dream. But, like I said, when you tell people, well, I want to go to Hollywood and I want to write songs and be a famous rock and roll singer, they all say, well, yeah, that's wonderful, but, better have another plan. And I didn't know another plan at that point, so I just took a shot at it.
Right.
The book, getting to the book, as I said, it came out of curiosity from kids that I was working with.
Right.
And at one point, my son set up a website for new writers, and he was trying to get contacts for it. So putting it all together, I wrote a series of articles called The Birth of Rock and Roll, an eyewitness account. And I did about 3 parts with that. And a friend of mine who really is a legend, who passed away not long ago at almost 100 years old, by the name of Morris Diamond, read him, and he said, you have a book. I'll introduce you to my publisher.
Oh.
And so that started. But I didn't know how to expand. I didn't want to do a history of rock and roll. People have done that. And my history ended up in the first 3 chapters of the book. It's just an eyewitness account of what I witnessed, because I was there in the beginning of it. And, I was a fortunate kid. As I said, I go back enough that, I listened to the end of the big band era and pop singers, and then got into country and rock and roll and R&B, and watched them morph into rock and roll.
Yeah.
And that spurred me, into wanting to become a singer myself. So, but we had not a lot of entertainment. Don't realize that a major part of what our entertainment was music.
Right.
Dances and concerts. If you think about it, in those days, there wasn't any internet, there was no cable, there were only 3 channels of TV, no video, no cassettes or CDs or MP3 in cars. We had AM radio, and we had records. And so if you wanted to hear music, you played records. If you wanted entertainment, you went to the movies.
Yeah.
So it was a different era, and I chronicled that, and then went from there. But it took me about halfway through the book to get a real rhythm about what I was trying to say. And then it morphed into, as I read it, this might help someone else to realize that you have a path that you take, but if you only take the straight path and ignore everything else, you might be out of the business in 5 minutes. So I loved it, and I just rolled with the punches and went where I could, and somehow it magically worked out okay. But that's the book. The best compliment I think I had came from my brother John, my youngest brother, when he read the book.
Oh, yeah?
And he said to me, Don, I know your story, but I found myself rooting for you to make it as I read the book. So I thought, well, maybe I did something right in it.
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful guide to people who are interested in taking a leap and going on a similar path to yours. And there's an overall inspiring tone to it. And I as well find myself rooting for you, just seeing where it's going. And so it's a wonderful account.
Well, the hardest thing I had to do was, again, thinking of the times I worked. There were no cell phones, no pictures. I didn't take any notes, didn't have a diary of any kind. I had to reconstruct those years. And the funny thing is, using modern technology, I Googled myself.
Yeah.
And I found the website, International Movie Database, and anyone who has a credit in a movie is listed there.
Right.
It listed films that I did starting as far back as 1969.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's chronological order, and it had the cast and the people I worked with. So it spurred my memory. I could go back to those years and remember some of those people. So the film part of it was a little easier. Records, recording studio, those days, I just had to recall. And I talked to a few people. I got in touch with people that I could, but it was really hard to get in touch with some people. So I just had to go with memory. And as I said, it took me 4 years to write the book.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Now I didn't write it, all at one time, because I was working at the high school, and I would jot notes down during the day and put them in a folder, and then on the weekends I'd write the chapter. And so it was slow going, but it also was good to go that slow because it gave me time to research as I went. So there are a lot of things after I read it, and things that people I'm in touch with now that I say, gee, I wish I would have put that story in. But essentially, it's a pretty good recap of who I worked with and where I went and how it became what it was.
Well, I think that it's just a wonderful gift to all your fans and people who aren't familiar with you, because it's, like I said, it's just a wonderful guide and a wonderful account of the business. And you really were, you started in such a fascinating time of music, because music was changing so rapidly, and you got to experience all that. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. The world, and it turned upside down quickly too. Just an aside, I was fortunate enough to grow up in an area where we could play. We were past the Frank Sinatras. We wanted something else as kids, and so we were. I lived in Stockton, California, a little town at that time, and there was a record store called Miracle Music, and they were ahead of their times because they had a section. They had pop, they had country, but they had rhythm and blues a section, and we could pick up records by Fats Domino and Chuck Berry and James Brown and some of the early R&B acts, because in those days, white radio stations wouldn't play what they call race music. But we as kids, if we wanted to dance, that was the music we were listening to. So we were... and that was the origin. We helped create, because of our generation, listened to so much of that music. And the early rock is a mixture of R&B, country, and pop. So right. Those acts really inspired us, and we had, fortunately, a place to go listen to music that wasn't being played on the radio. So it was an exciting time, but exciting time after exciting time happened, because once rock and Elvis and that whole thing happened and was going like crazy, a little group you might have heard of called the Beatles came across and changed music again, and so it was constantly changing. But you went from what they called country rock to hard rock and roll to folk rock to British rock. It kept changing and evolving, and it was an exciting time to be alive and see it happen.
There hasn't been a time like that since, and so it must be really cool to have lived through it.
Well, I would do it all over again if I could. Some people look back and say, I wish I would have, but I'm pretty glad I went through it when I did.
Yes. Well, that's great. Why don't we take a little break and play a quick game right now, just to learn more of your likes and dislikes, to get to know you a little better. And so this game is called
the 60-second 411.
I've got 15 questions, and I've got a stopwatch, and we're going to see how many questions you can answer before time runs out. So do you think you're up for it?
All right. Well, okay. I won't explain why on some of these things. We might get to some of them later. Let's do it.
All right, then. Okay, I'm setting my stopwatch for 60 seconds in 3, 2, 1. Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite movie?
Field of Dreams.
Favorite song?
I've Got a Name by Jim Croce.
Favorite TV show?
Going way back, Ozzie and Harriet.
Greatest fear?
Losing the ability to dream.
Hot or cold weather?
Neither.
Night owl or morning bird?
Night.
Favorite singer?
Evolved over the years, but I still have to go back to Elvis Presley.
Awesome. Favorite decade of music?
The 70s.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Biggest pet peeve?
People who lie.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, read minds. How about that?
Awesome. 60 seconds. You did so good. We got 13 questions answered.
Oh, man. I wanted all 15. Oh, well.
Well, I think take a few seconds off and bring you up to 15.
Well, no, it's okay. I don't want to cheat.
Well, why don't we go ahead and just hear your answers to the last two questions just for the fun of it. The last two questions were favorite subject in school and favorite food.
Favorite subject in school, lunch.
Oh, yeah.
And favorite food, I'd have to go now with linguine and clams. How's that?
Ooh, wow, that sounds very fancy.
All right. Well, we didn't miss too much on those last two.
Yeah, that is one of the best. You did an amazing job.
So now you're saying we're going back to serious, right?
Oh, yes, but no worries. We've got another game coming up later in the show, and it's going to be a lot of fun as well.
Okay, if you promise.
Oh, yes, I promise. I promise.
Okay.
And so we were talking earlier about how music was your plan B, and it ended up becoming your life in all its many forms. And so in the 60s, you actually sold your car and headed to Hollywood to pursue a career as a singer-songwriter. And so I must ask you, were you completely terrified or were you confident about it? What did your family think of this decision?
Well, I like to think if I was smarter, I would have been terrified because, it's interesting because I felt like I had to do it. I was working with a band, and the funny thing is my two younger brothers were in the band. It was called The Invaders, and we cut a record in Sacramento. I was just out of high school, and it was called I'm Leaving You, and we got a small record company to release it, and it became the record of the week on one of the local stations.
Oh my God.
Now, nothing happened from that because that company didn't have big distribution and all that, but it was in the stores and it sold, and it kind of, I thought, well, maybe I can build on this. And in the meantime, had been writing songs and doing demos and sending them to the record companies. And I think they were losing a fortune in mail costs, mailing them back to me saying, no, thank you. And I thought, well, if we went to Hollywood, give it 6 months to make it, that should be enough time. It might happen. So my two brothers were in school. They couldn't leave. Mm-hmm. But the other members of the band, I said, let's go to Hollywood and see if we can get going down there. And they all said, well, if you make it, you can call us. So I think they're still waiting for me to call them. But I took a shot, and I had a cousin in San Francisco who wanted to go with me, so I had at least someone to go down there with. My parents, they were proud of what I was doing. I was singing at school and in rallies, and at San Jose State, I did a football rally and followed an act called the Smothers Brothers, who went on to big fame out of there. So they were willing to give it a shot. And the bottom line is, I thought if I gave it 6 months and I didn't make it, what am I losing? I can always go back and go to work.
Right.
So that 6 months somehow went to 30 years. So selling that deal. But, later on in my life, if I thought about it, I probably would have said, and when I got there, actually, and realized that was, you want to talk about baseball and making the big leagues, and that's the elite. It's the same thing or more when you get to Hollywood and you realize the most talented people in the country are there in Hollywood trying to make it. And, your competition is just incredible. And working with people that had that talent, I realized this isn't going to happen for me. I was okay. I wasn't a bad singer, but that's not what's going to stand out and make me a star. And if I want to stay in business, I better find something else to do. But to answer the question slowly, I was nervous, but I wouldn't say it was terrifying. And I did have the support of my parents. They didn't say, that's a pretty dumb idea, don't do it. They just hugged me and said, good luck, you know.
Yeah.
And my father, through the years, through some of the lean years, he helped. You know, I borrowed money from him a few times, and, you know, he was there. He didn't say, well, come home. So they were very positive. And in fact, the dedication of my book was to my family, who taught me it was okay to dream, who gave me the space to do so, the courage to follow it no matter where it led me, and to Linda and Stephen, who encouraged me to write it down. And so that's how I felt about the family. My father was a man who only went to the 7th grade, but worked hard and got his own business and was very successful. So he was a good role model for hard work and following your dream.
Well, that's just wonderful to hear, and you ended up becoming a great role model yourself, so it runs in the family.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. And so you did initially, even though your career went in many different paths, you initially wanted to be a singer and a rock star. So could you tell us what kind of singer you wanted to be?
I started out, my oldest brother came home from the service, and he had a concert ukulele that he gave to me.
Right.
And I learned to play it enough to take really good ideas and write mediocre songs. But the first songs that I learned were Elvis Presley songs.
Right.
Because everybody wanted to be Elvis. And I had a girlfriend who went crazy every time she heard him. So I said, well, I can sing those songs.
Yeah.
And she did look at me a little different. And that's a story that really happened with Rick Nelson, who I worked with. He had a girlfriend that loved Elvis, and he said he was cutting a record. And he ended up singing on the Ozzie and Harriet show, and he was a kind of a role model for me. But I wanted to be, realistically, nobody could be Elvis. He was the king. But Rick Nelson and the stars of those days, the Paul Ankas and the Frankie Avalons and those teen guys who were singing kind of light rock, that's where I started. But the thing that was terrible is that I loved all kinds of music, and I would try to sing along too with R&B artists. And when I got to Hollywood and started hearing some of the what ended up being blue-eyed soul, like the Righteous Brothers did, and some of the white singers who were singing R&B songs, I really wanted to go there. And I would go in and sing my heart out, thinking I had all this soul. And then I'd listen to a playback, and it looked like, you know, Frank Sinatra trying to do the Temptations, and it just wasn't a good fit. So what I wanted to do and what I could do were two different things. And
right.
As I said, it evolved. I think right now, if somebody said, how would you like to sing? I'd like to be maybe someone like Michael McDonald. Anyway, I just wanted to be able to interpret a song.
Right.
Because in the end, the hit song is all about relating to people and making it their song. And in order to do that, you have to honestly be able to interpret it. So I wasn't there, but I was objective enough to realize it early. And again, like the plan B, if that was my plan A, then I wasn't going to make it. I'd have to go home.
It seems you were really able to adapt.
Well, it was either that or go home, and I didn't want to go home. Not that I didn't love home and family, but I just felt there was something more.
Right. And so soon after that, you began working as a recording engineer and a record producer. And I don't think many people realize what wizards recording engineers are. And so I'm just wondering, how did you learn this craft, and what was this time in your career like?
Well, it all, again, one thing morphs into another. I met a man named Jesse Hodges, who was a record producer, kind of a vocal coach, and I started working with him. Mm-hmm. And he had some early hits. But he said one day, we just kind of hit it off. But one day he said, you know, I just bought a recording studio. Would you like to work for me and work in it? And I said, sure.
Yeah.
And it was a great deal. I was working at a record company in sales. And he said, I said, what does it pay? He said, well, here's what we can do. You can draw unemployment and work with me, and you can use the studio whenever you want. And then, let me know if you run short, and we'll come up with money. I thought that was the best deal in the world.
Yeah.
So I had never been an engineer, but I'd been in sessions. And you have to understand, in those days, again, technology, when you see those old movies and you see Frank Sinatra and he's recording, he's in the middle of the room and all the musicians are there and there's an engineer and they're mixing everything together.
Yeah, I've seen
and there
that.
There isn't any way to do it over or edit it. If somebody made a mistake in that, you had to start all over again.
Wow.
So the engineer had to mix everything perfectly because it was going to a tape and there was a final tape. So that's where I started with him, was with the technology that you recorded 6 or 7 players all in the room together. And I, like I said, I had a good ear, but he just threw me in there. He said, okay, you're going to record.
Yeah.
And, so I learned to mix, to work with singers, to make sure that everything was in balance. All things that helped me later on when I did live scores for film, because they were still doing that. But I was just, it wasn't going to school and a year here and 2 years there. It was sink or swim, get in and mix. And there was a little bit of overdubbing where you could go from one machine to another, but nothing like later where you had 24 and 32 different channels and you could put each instrument there and later edit it out, So I had to learn from the seat of my pants, and I kind of went from the dark ages to what's happening now in recording. That was just a chance to stay in the business. It introduced me to the art of mixing, of working with singers and musicians, and also, meeting some people that helped me keep going. So it was a wonderful time. I only spent a little over a year there before I went out on my own producing. Probably was too soon. But again, I was young and impatient and wanted to move on. So I introduced Jesse to my brother Tom to take my place as an engineer. And my brother Tom Perry, if you look him up, probably has 50 or more gold and platinum albums that he mixed in that studio. He became one of the top engineers in the business. So he followed me in there and was tremendously successful. But I moved on, and I was glad I did. It was bigger and better and failing upward.
Yeah, on to the next phase for sure. As a matter of fact, in the 70s, your next big step was becoming a concert promoter. And I mean, you did it for some of the top names in the business, like Stevie Wonder and the Jackson 5, just to name a couple. And so this sounds like an exciting but really tough job. And so could you tell us about what this job was like and some memories that stick with you?
Yeah. Well, again, that was a chance phone call from a friend from Sacramento, who said he had booked the arena for the state fair.
Yeah.
And he wondered if I had any acts or could put a concert together. And I was, at that time, working with Rick Nelson, and he had a big hit called Garden Party. So I got Rick to do that first concert and got Linda Ronstadt to open. for him, and we had a tremendously successful first concert, and learning as I went, again, thrown into it. And I met a young agent who got us Linda Ronstadt by the name of Jack Stein, and he was working his way up. And so we, the next concert, believe it or not, was Jackson 5. And I didn't have that much experience, but I had an idea that places like Sacramento and Stockton, San Jose, Bakersfield, those were all smaller towns, and they didn't get the big acts that were going to San Francisco and Los Angeles on the weekends. So I booked the Jackson 5 for a Thursday in Fresno and a Sunday in Sacramento.
That is crazy.
And we had the at that I was the first white promoter that the Jacksons allowed to promote them, and the concert in Sacramento set an outdoor record at that time for attendance, with something like 15,000 in Sacramento. So we were in it. All of a sudden, all the acts that we asked for, Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight, I became known, and it's a funny story because there was a promoter in Dallas who wanted to do the Stevie Wonder concert, and he hadn't had the experience. So the agent at William Morris said, would you co-promote with a guy named Don Perry? And he was an African-American promoter starting out, and he said, I don't want some hotshot from the West Coast coming out here and telling me how to do a concert. And they said, oh, no, he's done the Jacksons and Stevie and the Temptations, and he's the biggest black promoter on the West Coast. So he said, oh, okay, I'll do it with him. So he went crazy at the airport when I landed, trying to look for a black promoter, and this white guy walked off the plane. And there was a moment of stunned silence, but we ended up working together, and he actually came out to LA and worked for me for a while. At that concert, the agent tried to force an act on me to open for Stevie Wonder, and Stevie was selling out the arena. That was about 12,000 seats. We were just going to do a hot local group. And they said, we got this group and we're promoting him, and Columbia Records wants him. And I said, we don't need anybody. And they said, well, how much do you have for an opening act? And I said, we're only paying about $1,500. They said, oh, we can't do it for that. They travel with about 30 people. And I said, well, if Columbia likes them that much, we'll pay $1,500. Let Columbia pay the difference. They said, okay. So the act was Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh, yeah.
By the time that concert came around, they were huge.
Yeah.
So we had, and later on, my brother Tom recorded Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I never wanted to tell Maurice White that we got him for $1,500 and had to be forced to put them on the bill. But that was one of the things. The other, the Jackson 5 were huge, and it was just about the time Michael was doing records started out. So we got two acts for the price of one. But Michael was so popular, and the frenzy from young girls at the concert with raging hormones was unbelievable.
I can imagine.
We had the concert in Fresno, California, and the arena held about 6,500 seats, and it was jammed. And the police put up about a 6-foot temporary fence around the stage.
Yeah.
And they were in between the stage and the fence, kind of like a moat with police officers, because they didn't want people rushing the stage. So the Jacksons were well aware at the end of their show they might have problems. So the last song they did a whole thing with smoke on the stage, and by the time they finished, all you saw was smoke, and they went off stage behind, got in the car, and left.
Very clever.
So there was a young girl, I'd say she was maybe 11 or 12 years old, who obviously had seen their show. And right toward the end of the song, I saw her out of the corner of my eye running down the aisle. And she leaped up and hit the top of the fence and leaped over the police onto the stage and grabbed Michael by the waist. And they were pulling her off stage with him.
Oh, my gosh.
And that's the last I saw of that show. Until Sunday, they were in Sacramento, and They had removed the girl from his waist, fortunately, and he was able to do the Sacramento show. But he also had to run off of that outdoor stage, too, and catch up with a limousine while people were chasing him. So it was, you wondered how they did it every day, and it had to be terrifying at some time. Gratifying, terrifying that you could actually get trampled. So, but I got some nice concert memories, some awful ones. I had Charlie Rich, a country performer, not show up for a concert.
Oh my gosh!
San Jose that was sold out, and I had to deal with that. So there were some good and bad incidents. Rick Nelson in that first concert, getting off the stage in Sacramento, had his shirt ripped off him while he was trying to get in the car. So it was dangerous times. But the terror of doing concerts was this: it was a lot of pressure. You had to book the act and pay them half of their fee up front.
Wow.
Then you had the arena. Then you had the set promotion. You had to hire the crew, the security, the box office. All those things were paid. And then you had to sit back and sweat and hope that enough people bought tickets so that you covered your cost and made a little bit of money. So it was tremendous pressure sitting there saying, oh, gee, maybe 10 more people and I'll break even. So I had enough of that by the time I was out of it. I think I always had gray hair, but it gave me a lot more. But again, that was a great time. We kind of opened up some of those small markets and got so successful that some of the big promoters went to the agents and said, hey, that's our territory. Who's Don Perry? We're booking everybody. So I kind of got squeezed out, but I was also ready to get out of concerts at that time too.
Yeah.
And I had my next phone call that got me into my next adventures.
Yes, and speaking of your next adventures, that might have had to do with being a music supervisor for films and television.
That's it.
Wow, this I would like to talk with you about this time, and I would also like to talk about how we look at the industry, and a lot of times there's these magic partnerships, as I like to call them, where someone just finds a partner to work with and they just click, and it's just like magic, the work they do together. And I think that this may be true for you and Bob Summers. You talk about him in your book. So could you tell us when you first met and what your time was like working together?
Yeah, I joked when I was writing the book, if I left out Bob Summers, it would have been a 10-page book. But again, I had a two-part situation with Bob Summers. I first met him when I was engineering for Jesse Hodges. And Jesse was working with me to produce a singer, and he said, we're going to do a session, and what do you think? And here's where the guitars go, and here's where this goes, and we had ideas on how we were going to do the music. And I said, when are we going to record it? He said, we're not. I want to send you out to Bob Summers, and he's going to do the background tracks for us.
Right.
So I went out and I met Bob Summers that early, and he was just a little quick background. There was a group in the 50s called Les Paul and Mary Ford, and they were one of the hottest groups of the 50s. They had 16 hits in a couple of years, and Les Paul was a pioneer in recording.
Right.
Well, Mary Ford was Bob Summers' sister, so Les Paul was his brother-in-law, and he learned to play guitar and to mix from Les. Bob had his own studio at 13, and his first hit when he was 16.
My goodness.
So I went out and I met Bob, and he was just coming off a record called Suspicion by Terry Stafford, where Bob had played all the instruments and recorded everything. And it was a huge record. Only went to number 2, only because the Beatles had the first 6 hits in that time. He was the only artist to have a top 5 record that wasn't a Beatle record.
Oh, cool.
And then, so I met Bob, then we did some record things, but when I went off and did concerts and other things, we lost touch a little bit. So going forward, I got a call from a guy named Chris Kane, who I had cut a record 7 years earlier, and he remembered me, and he said, do you know how to do a film? music for a film? And I said, sure. He said, well, I've got a film, and I need you to do the music, produce the music. So I called Bob, and I said, Bob, have you ever done a film? And he said, yeah. And I said, good, we got a job. So we did that first film for him, and we did 3 more for him. And I didn't know how to do it other than like a record. So he had a budget. I guaranteed it. I hired Bob. I called the musicians, the studio. I produced it like it was a record. And I was an all-in music department for him, cleared the music and whatever. And that set the stage for what I did. But I couldn't have done it without Bob. So over the years with Bob, we did, as near as I can remember, at least 27 features, films, 16 to 20 movies a week for television, 7 TV series. We worked with 38 artists together, cut 29 albums together. And for a period of 12 years, we worked virtually every day. And so much so that we bought a recording studio because we couldn't handle the amount of stuff we were doing at outside studios.
Right.
So he became, a partner, a friend, and family. And he was a tremendous inspiration because I don't use the word genius very often, but he could do anything. He could do a small group in the London Symphony Orchestra, and he was self-taught. But he had, no matter what the job was, small or big, a lot of money, no money, he was driven to do the best he could, and so was I. So no job was too small. And, he taught me that it's not done till it's done.
Right.
So we're both happy. And the other thing was, interestingly, we worked with a lot of the same musicians and family. And the very serious business of doing these films and everything became fun. We had a lot of fun doing it. I never had a day where I got up and said, I don't want to go to work. So, but yeah, he was just an incredible inspiration.
Well, that's wonderful. And you made so many amazing works together. And I love how no matter what job it was, you both always gave it your best. That was just, yeah. I
always felt like that when I talked to anybody who had a film or a record or whatever, I always kind of approach it as if this was the most important job in the world.
Right.
Because to those people, it was. Mm-hmm. What they were doing was the most important thing in the world. So I had to have the same mindset, and that worked. All of my work was repeat business or referrals. And that only happens when you make people happy with what you've done. Exactly.
You two worked on so many projects together, as you listed, and there is one special one that sticks out to me, and I have to talk about it. It's one of your many famous works, and this one is the original dub of Sailor Moon. So I don't know what sort of magic was used to make it, but the music in that project was absolutely beautiful, and it's one of a kind. And so I have to ask you about that project and the music process and what your memories are of it.
Well, you hit the right word on it. It was magic that it even came together. I had worked with Karen Ullman, who was the head of Deke at that time when they picked up Sailor Moon from Japan. And we had worked with her going way back to Taft Entertainment and had done some series for her. But the problem was that they had a very tight deadline, and they had to get the first 40 episodes recorded.
Crazy.
And in a series, you're lucky if you can do one episode a week. I'm really pushing a composer to write and look at the music, and so obviously we didn't have 40 weeks, and we couldn't do each one individually. So we did, working with the music editors, we did a library. We looked at the feel of the project, the first episodes. Bob worked on the theme. One of the kids we used on a lot of other things did the demo. of the vocals. They were trying to get somebody else to do it. They liked that so much they used it. But what we did, and it's a little hard to explain, but we did a library. We took the theme and we did it as many different ways as we could: slow, fast, up, on a chase, dramatic. We took small things. We took a fight scene, for instance, and did music for that, and then did it with small group, big group, electronically. We did every kind of mood that we could do. And I was pretty good at that. I put together a library for Grizzly Adams, and I had a good memory for what worked for different sequences. So we did enough music that we thought would do the 40 episodes, and we turned it over to the music editors, and not only were they able to do those 40 episodes, but I don't know how many they did, but they used that series continually throughout the series. So it was magic. It came together in the time span, but just a really satisfying job, because we didn't know. They said we have this anime series coming over from Japan. I didn't know what anime was.
Yeah.
And we had no idea that this cartoon would have a following in the States. But as you said, last week I got another composer who said I was so influenced by music on that, it got me going in my career, and he asked me some questions about it, technique-wise and everything. So that was really magic that we got it, magic that we did it, and magic that series still has the following it has today.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that... So, but it isn't the first time that I had magic happen in my career, because to me, every time the phone rang like that one, it was potentially magic, and it led me to something that at the time I didn't know was going to be that memorable, but sure is good to look back on now.
Well, I would like to thank you for you and Bob's work on that, because I've never heard anything like that soundtrack. You two did a fantastic job.
Well, thank you. I'm still proud of it too. There are a lot of things I look back on and say, gee, that sounds kind of funny because it was in a different time. There are some things I still look back and say that was pretty good. It's nice to do that every once in a while.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't we switch gears again and take a moment to play another game, which is
Truth or Dare.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yes, are you ready? We've got 4 questions we'll be asking, and you can select Truth or Dare.
I'll tell you right now. We don't have to go Truth or Dare. I'll tell you the truth.
All right, that sounds good to me. So, question 1, what is something surprising no one knows about you?
Oh, here's one that I'm glad I didn't confess to while I was in my career. But in 30 years, like I said, I ended up being the supervisor or producer. And I was the guy in the booth that would say to the musicians, that's the good take, or the singer's great, that's it, or the mix. So I made the final decisions on it. So it's embarrassing to say that I can't read a note of music.
Oh, really?
People always say, what do you play? What do you, and I have to say, I don't. I just had an ear for it, based on the years I had in the studios and working with it. And one of the biggest compliments that Bob Summers had, because he's one of those guys that just does everything well, about halfway through our working on the Grizzly Adams series, I found him saying to me, what do you think, Don? And I thought, my God, if this guy who does everything well trusts me enough to say, what do you think? I think I'm doing something right. But no, I can follow along, but I can't read music.
That's really interesting.
So there you go.
There's people, I know people in my own family, they're so talented at playing the piano, but they don't know how to read music. So that seems to be a recurring thing, is if you have an ear for it, that can overcome.
Well, sometimes, again, Bob was self-taught, and he'd work with people who were classically trained, and sometimes he'd do an arrangement, and they'd look at it and say, you can't do that. And then they would record it and say, God, that's amazing. But he knew it would work. His ear was that good. So, and he learned to write and read music, but he was self-taught, so he didn't have the restrictions that a lot of guys have. And maybe that helped me too.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for telling us that. So, next question, what is your least favorite kind of music? Since you've been around so many different kinds of music, what is honestly your least favorite?
Oh, I'm probably going to lose more than half of your audience. But when rap came in, I was really lost because I don't relate to rap. And to me, it sounded like poetry with a rhythm section. So I don't like it, but ironically, when I was at the high school, there was a young teacher there who was a rap artist, and we talked a lot, and I was finishing up my book, and he went out, and I inspired him to go out on his own, and he's very successful as a rap artist. So it's not that I don't want to encourage people to do what they love. I just can't. I don't relate to it, but I feel very proud of him that he went out and did what he wanted to do and gave up a career that was making him pretty good money.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. What is the craziest thing you've ever done?
Oh, that's an easy one. Going to Hollywood to make it. That's probably the craziest thing anybody would want to do. I'm going to pack up and go and be a star. I mean, if you really think about that on the face of it, what are the odds?
Yeah.
So that's an easy one.
Yeah, I would agree. And our last Truth or Dare question, is there an embarrassing song that you secretly love?
Oh.
We all have that song that we listen to, and it's our secret jam.
It's kind of corny. I like the song that was done a few years back called That's What Friends Are For. And it's sappy and sentimental, but almost everybody I have in the book that I worked with for any length of time became a friend and had my back and helped me. So that song kind of hits a nerve, and every time I hear it, I turn it up. But there are a lot of embarrassing songs I like. Some of the songs in the 50s or 60s that were big hits, and I still love them, and they're pretty embarrassing. Who's excited about Shaboom and songs like that anymore that have lyrics like Shaboom, Shaboom, yada da yada da yada da. So that could be one that's embarrassing.
Hey, I understand. I listen to music from every decade and just every genre, so I understand. I love all those kinds of songs.
So there you are. See, that wasn't. You didn't have to dare me to do.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad, was it?
No.
Well, that's good. With a career like yours, there must be so much you're proud of, and you should be proud of because you've accomplished so much. But I was just wondering, is there a single work in particular that you regard as your favorite or one that you're most proud of?
Boy, that's a tough one. I'm going to fudge a little bit and say there are two for different reasons. The Grizzly Adams TV series, because of what we did on that and the theme song to that, Maybe, which I had to fight to get released and actually had to fund the single. And that song sold nearly 3 million singles worldwide. So that show that a third of the country was watching at various times, and that record that sold 3 million, is very gratifying, and I'm proud of that. But the one that was the most challenging and still rewarding today was a low-budget picture called Night of the Comet.
Oh, right.
And in Night of the Comet had less budget than you would get to do an album, and I had to do 19 songs for it.
Insane.
Because it takes place in a radio station. Mm-hmm. So with very little money and Bob and a bunch of friends. And I had some name artists that came in and did it. and a soundtrack that didn't sell anything. I'm probably most proud of what we accomplished on that film with very little to work with, and it's become a huge cult favorite. The albums are collector's items. There's a website, there's a Facebook page, and I'm constantly in touch with people who love the music for that, and they've asked me many times to do insights on their artists and everything. So in terms of accomplishing something with very and listening to the music and still being proud of it, I'd have to say Comet. So there you go. That was 2 for the price of 1.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they're both wonderful pieces of work. These days, you're married and you have a son, Stephen. So how has your family,
Right.
how has your family been a part of your career, and how do they feel like living with such a legend?
Well, I tell my wife I'm a legend every day, but
Oh, right.
I did on the mirror. But Linda and I have been together 43 years, and she was with me during a lot of those years.
Wow.
She actually did some office work for me, so she understood the hours. She was with me all the way. She knew that when I went to work during the day or in a session or dubbing session or record session, there was no 9 to 5. I was home when I was home. It was over when it was over.
Right.
And I was kind of a workaholic. I had a first marriage that didn't work out because of it, you know. But she was not only there with me, but she taught me to enjoy the time we had when I wasn't working. So she kind of centered me that I worked hard, but our time was our time. As for Stephen, he was kind of too young to really know. He was only 8 years old when I did Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he just knew his dad did some music stuff. And then later on, I was working at the school, and, you know, he knew about the backbook. But writing the book, I one day, you know, it was hard, and I was trying to remember. And I said to Linda, I don't know why I'm writing a book. I'm a guy that nobody has heard of. I'm not a star, unless you saw the movie credits, which in most cases were at the end of a film, and only the guys sweeping out the theater saw at the end of it, you know. Why am I writing this? And she said to me, if for no other reason, your son doesn't know that part of your life, so keep writing.
Wow.
So she kept me going on it. And, you know, as it turned out, it was good. Stephen knew what I did. We have some great conversations. He keeps me up to date. You know, he loves music, and but it gave him an idea of what his dad did. And so if I never wrote a solo book, that was worth it.
For sure. What a gift to Stephen and to your family. And I'm one of those people that, because everyone always clears out once the movie's over, but I'm one of those people that likes to sit there and watch the credits through. So I've always been aware of your name.
Oh, well, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So as we're beginning to wrap up this episode, could you tell us what your goals are for the future? What do you see looking forward?
Well, you know, right now, you know, I don't look too far ahead. I really love living day to day.
Awesome.
But I've lived my life following the dream. So, you know, I'm still writing. I'm doing these interviews. I still occasionally get calls. I actually have a couple of friends from back in the day who are trying to put independent films together, and have asked me if I'd do it, and I would in a minute. But you know, I mentioned a while back, it's kind of an obscure song, I've Got a Name, that Jim Croce did. And what strikes me about that is he, you know, talks about I've got a name and I carry it with me like my daddy did, but I'm living the dream that he kept hid. So his father didn't do it. But the chorus is moving me down the highway, rolling me down the highway, moving ahead so life won't pass me by. And
Wow.
I've always felt that way. If you stand still and rest on your laurels, life will pass you by. So I'm looking to keep moving and keep going and not letting it pass me by. So that's how I live my life now.
And I think that's a wonderful way to live your life. And so I think you're doing a wonderful job. Last, I was wondering, do you have any advice for your fans who want to pursue a career similar to yours, and also how they can best know what you're up to and keep up with you?
Okay, well, that's kind of an easy one, because when I was doing career days and things like that for the students, and they'd ask me, can I make it in the business today? And I would say no. But if you take that for an answer, you're done, you know.
Right.
And I come, as corny as it sounds, I come from a time when, you know, sometimes my friends and I, we'd lay on the grass and we'd look up in the sky and we'd dream about what we want to do when we grow up. And a couple of quotes that I live by, Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And Orson Swett Martin said, all great men have been great dreamers. That dream develops a passion for something, and that passion is a motivation for what you're doing. And you don't have to have someone force you to do something you don't want to do. You're already motivated. So to me, the saddest thing I've ever heard in my ear is when people say, you know, God, Don, you're lucky to have done what you've done. I wish I would have tried to do what I really wanted to do when I look back. Mm-hmm. And so I say to anyone who has the dream, you owe it to yourself. You have one life to follow the dream. And if you don't make it, if I never made it, I would never have looked back and said, I regret it, because I would have tried it. And, you know, always have a plan B, of course. That might even be better than the one you're following.
Yeah.
But, you know, just go for it. You know, forget the hockey player, very famous hockey player, but I'm drawing a blank on it, but he said, I miss every shot I don't take. So if you don't take the shot, you're never going to make it. So take the shot. That was Wayne Gretzky. I want to credit him. But take the shot. You can always work. You can always go back on what people call a normal life. But if you have a passion and a dream for something, you owe it to yourself to pursue it, or you'll regret it the rest of your life. That's as basic as I can give it. If people want to follow me, I admit I have a website, donperry.net, but I haven't kept it up to date. But there's still a lot of stuff on there, blogs that I did, and how to reach me. But more up to date is my Facebook page, Don Perry Music, and I keep putting music things on there, and people do contact me there. So those two places, donperry.net and Facebook, Don Perry Music. And I'd love to hear from people. It's fun for me to maybe guide somebody towards something they want to do.
Well, thank you for offering your guidance. I'm sure there are many people who would love to reach out to you. So thank you for sharing those places and those sources.
Well, I hope it happens. Thank you, by the way. Very nice interview, and I appreciate all the kind words.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, Don's book, Don Perry Produced the Music, is available on Amazon, Google Books, Barnes & Noble, and other places. And it's truly a treasure trove of knowledge and experiences. So go buy your copy right now. And that's it for another episode of Keiko's Diary. Thank you to our listeners for supporting the show and MLA Entertainment. And also thank you, Don, for coming on the show. It really was a privilege. So before we go, could I ask you one last thing?
I'm Don Perry, and for MLA Entertainment, check out their original web series, Project Infinity. And as always, keep being creative.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. You guys heard it from here.
Thank you for listening to Keiko's Diary. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We would love to hear from you. Write questions and comments to show your support and share this podcast with your friends. We'll be back with another exciting episode before you know it. In the meantime, keep being creative.